The Niles S&A Silent Film Museum is known primarily for its silent film screenings with live piano accompaniment. But what remains behind the scenes are thousands of artifacts and films in our ever-growing archival collection. In this series, we are highlighting recently obtained and noteworthy additions to our museum. The device being inspected by David Kiehn is one of our rarest artifacts. This is a camera designed to reproduce color motion pictures from the early 1920s, called Prizma. Prizma was one of many companies working in the technical research and development field of the motion picture business. In the first decades of the movies, the race to develop a reliable and straightforward method of bringing color to the movies was on, and Prizma was right in the middle of it. Our museum has two Prizma Color cameras covering the company's entire development, a more rudimentary version 1 and a more complex version 2. Today, David Kiehn will walk us through these two extraordinary cameras to help contextualize the significance and operation of Prizma Color.
This is a unique camera in our collection, made for the West Coast Prizma Color representative in 1917. His name was George Stone. He was based in Berkeley. He mostly shot time-lapse animation with this camera. Missing its lens, that's what when we got it, it was missing its lens, but it shouldn't be very difficult to figure out, a mounting bracket and a lens that would be appropriate to use on this camera. It was probably a Zeiss Tessar. It's a two-color system, similar to the Prizma Color system of a few years before, and it would shoot alternating red and green frames on black and white film, and you would project it back with the same filter arrangement on a projector at 32 frames a second, and the two colors would blend together on the screen visually with your persistence of vision and create color images. It was, as you can imagine, pretty primitive, but it did give a color effect. The problem was that with alternating images, one frame after another, you would get a gap that would create color fringing depending on which filter you were looking through. So you might have a red fringe on a green frame, or a green fringe on a red frame, and it was more pronounced when there was movement, which was why, it was pretty effective for time-lapse photography when there was very little individual movement, but overall you would get animation there. So other companies like Technicolor started out with the same kind of filter arrangement, and they all quickly realized that something better needed to be invented to make the colors more realistic and more technically advanced. This camera was made in San Francisco by Walden Ball, who was an inventor and also a film laboratory owner. He got, for instance, Frank Capra his first job in the industry developing film in his laboratory in 1921. Walden Ball invented all kinds of different lab equipment that was manufactured by Arthur Reeves in Los Angeles. Arthur Reeves was a former S&A cameraman in Chicago who moved to Los Angeles and got into the equipment manufacturing business. So they had an arrangement with Walden's inventions that were pretty innovative at the time. Ball, I think, had his lab in operation in San Francisco from the teens into the 1950s or so, and before he retired. He was a little known but important figure in San Francisco film history. Ball invented no more than he needed to. He used these magazines from the Universal camera that started being manufactured in Chicago in 1915, and he didn't need to reinvent that. It was already done, but the the movement and all of that stuff, he pretty much built from scratch, I believe. I think the movement is more or less based upon a Williamson claw pull-down eccentric cam. George Stone, after his Prismacolor days, became an instructor at San Jose State University and gave this camera in the 1950s to the California Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park. And they had it until the early 2000s. I think they decommissioned their motion picture and photography equipment in 2005 or so. I remember as a little kid going to the Academy in the 1950s and seeing silent era movie cameras on display behind a glass partition. This may have been one of the cameras that I saw when I was a kid in their 50s. Who would know that eventually it would come to us? It's, I think, one of our prized equipment possessions. After Prismacolor's additive camera, they decided to make a more advanced model, a subtractive color system that used a prism behind the lens to expose two frames at once, red and green simultaneously, so you would eliminate the color fringing problems. This is one of the cameras that was made by Prismacolor. They were based in New Jersey. This camera was made around 1921, and as far as I can tell, only about 3 of these cameras were made. All 3 are out there somewhere. This is a much more complex camera than the additive Prismacolor camera. It could very well have been used on the shoot that was done in England to shoot the first color feature film before Technicolor's Toll of the Sea. Prismacolor made The Glorious Adventure, which was released in 1922, directed by J. Stuart Blackton, who had started his film career with the Vitagraph Company. So he directed that film and used this camera, I believe, and the other 2. Holds 400 feet of film, whereas the old additive camera held 200 feet. The prism arrangement was behind the lens here. We'll take that off. There's also a see this gearing arrangement for the movement, much more complex than the first camera. So the prism system is in between the lens elements here, and you can see how each section gets its own connection to the color wheel here. The aperture is right in here, so it's quite a difference from the old one. That feature film still survives. You can actually see it on YouTube, The Glorious Adventure. The copy that is on YouTube is kind of murky, but you can see that there is a color effect to it. Not as good as the 3-color Technicolor version of the 30s, of course, but for its time, it was comparable to Technicolor's 2-color system, which was very similar to this Prismacolor system as well. They both had a taking 2 frames at once using a prism to split the image. The system was relatively short-lived. How many people have seen Prismacolor films? But Prismacolor's chief cameraman, William Crespinall, continued in trying to develop color systems, and eventually was involved with 2 different systems called Cinecolor and Multicolor in the 1930s that did low-budget color films with a bipack system that was different again from this. And that continued, I think, into the 1950s or so as a cheap alternative to Technicolor.
That's all for today's episode. Please like and subscribe to keep up with our YouTube channel. The Niles S&A Silent Film Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in the District of Niles in Fremont, California. Visit our website at nilesfilmmuseum.org. Until next time, thank you for watching.